This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be CEOs of our own power company. And we're going to be acquiring different power plants, some that use coal, natural gas, uranium, oil, and we're going to be turning those power plants by using resources into money. Today we're talking about Power Grid, the card game from Freedom and Freeze. In the North America, it's coming from Rio Grande Games. It's for 2 to 6 players, and the box says 60 minutes to play, where Power Grid takes 2 to 3 times as long as that. Is it as good as the regular game, but a lot quicker, or does it leave too much of it out? Let's find out, but let me first show you how it's played. At the beginning of the game, each player takes the CEO of the color of their choice. They'll get 2 of these cards, one for in front of them, and one that they'll use for turn order. Each player starts with 12 Electro, and yes, it's paper money like normal Power Grid. There's 3 phases in the game: auctioning power plants, buying resources, and bureaucracy. Turn order, there's some turn order cards here. First and third rounds go this way, and the second round comes back this way. Now, turn order is random at the beginning of the game, and we have the market. Now, there's a specific setup between beginner power plants, which are dark green, and regular power plants, similar to a regular Power Grid. You put a 1 here. This means that the lowest one can always be auctioned off for the beginning of $1, 1 Electro, no matter what. And you put it in smallest to largest numbers, and this is the current market that people can auction off, and this is the future market, just like normal Power Grid. Starting with the first player, they're going to pick any one of the ones that are available and begin to bid on that, and then bidding goes clockwise until everybody passes except one player. If you pass, you cannot come back in for that same power plant. And once you have one, you cannot buy any more. You're forced to buy 1 power plant in the first round, but other than that, you don't have to buy a power plant at all. So whatever player is the largest bid will pay that much to the bank and place this card, let's say it was this one, in front of them, and then a new one would come out, and you would rearrange the market in making sure that if it comes out later, it's always more expensive if it has the same price there. We'd then go to the next player that has not gotten, in turn order, that has not gotten a power plant this round, and see if they want to bid and auction one off. And just keeping in mind that you can never have more than 3. If you already have 3 and you get another power plant, you must discard one of the power plants, just like normal Power Grid. Once everybody's had a chance to at least initiate a bid if they'd like, then we go to the next phase, which is buying resources. Now here's the resource market. At top is how much Electro each of these will cost. So there's columns of 2, 3, and 4 that will always be filled. And as we go down, we see it's sorted by type. We have coal, then oil, then natural gas, then uranium. And the number at the top tells you how many there are. So on the top left there, we see that one's 3 coal. The next one is 2 coal, and the next one is 2 coal to the right. But those are worth $2, $3, and $4. And as we go down, we see the different amounts in those different columns there. Now there'll be a different amount of cards here going down depending on the different amount of players. Now, starting in reverse player order, they could buy as many of these as they want, with the rule that they can only hold up to twice as many as a power plant needs. So if someone had a power plant that had 3 coal to run it, they couldn't have more than 6. So if they bought this one that's 3, this one that brings it up to 5, this one brings it up to 7, they'd be 1 over. So actually what happens is they would buy this one for 2, and these 2 for 3. So that'd be 6, that'd be $8, that 8 Electro that they'd pay, and they would put these in front of them. But because this one is too much, they would have to move this one down so that they could only be holding 6. That's what would be in front of them. Now, because they actually had to take less than what they actually took, they would put a single out here. These are all singles. Now, you could just look for the one that you want for the resource. For every one that you're over, if you were 2 over, you'd put 2 of these, for example. And these are all worth $1, and there could be an unlimited amount of rows here. These are sort of the single overages that people have been gathering. You get that. Now, each player would then go through and buy as many resources as they want. This does not get filled until at the end of the next phase, so resources are quite limited. Now, once this pile gets emptied, you would shuffle up any discarded ones, and you would actually have to shuffle these ones into a new deck. And if the deck gets empty again, there's some other specific cards that get put in there and added to scale the game towards the end. And a bureaucracy going in turn order, first to last, they decide how many of the power plants they want to power. So this one takes 2 coal. I have 3 coal. If I want to, I can power this. So this costs 2. I would go down from 3 to 2 and 2 to 1. Now, if this was at 2, and I was just here to power it, this would go from 2 to 1, from 1 to 0, and then this would go into the discard pile, and I would get 4 electro. I keep that separate from my pile of money because this will determine turn order at the end of this round. Because whoever made the most money that round, let's say it was the yellow player there, would move first. If you're tied, whoever has the higher number power plant. Then we would start refilling the market. So this one needs 2 more cards because there's already 2 out here. So what happens is they move from 3 to 2. So this one would come up here. And since there's none left, this one now would come up here. This would slide down here. And then you would fill this up to what you want. So it just kind of, it fills in that order. And then we would refill these empty spots with all this here. This would get totally stocked up again. Then when we reset the power plant market, we take the highest one and we would put it face down at the bottom of the pile, and then we'll get a new one and do it the same way. Okay, this is 8. It would go in the normal range. Since that's the highest, that's that. Now, during this, when you get towards the bottom of the pile, you might come up with a 1 more round. If that comes up, this would have been replaced here, and at this point, only you take the bottom one out. And now you just have 6 power plants here. So now it will be the final round, and you can buy any one of those 6. And then you go to the final scoring, which I'll talk about now. And in that final round, for every power plant you're able to power, instead of getting the money like normal, you get them as points. So if I was able to power all 3 of these, I would get 27 points. Plus, for every $10 electro I have left over, it's a point. Let's say I had that would be 28 points. At that point, whoever has the most wins. If you're tied, whoever has the most money left at that point wins, which would be between $0 and $9. All right, well, there is Power Grid, the card game. Now, I was super excited about this because, number 1, I love Power Grid. And number 2, I had heard firsthand from people that had played it at the Gathering earlier this year that just said so many great things about it. Mike Fitzgerald was going bananas about it. And I gotta say, it's exactly what I hoped it was, and exactly what I hoped it would be. It does feel like Power Grid, and it does feel like it's half the time or even a little less. They used that newer graphic design, which I'm not as hot on as the older style, but it is what it is. But you're auctioning off power plants. Everything kind of works the same way. You're buying resources. It works somewhat similarly in that turn order aspect. And I love the way that they have those cards and that they're different amounts. And that when you buy them, you put them in front of you, then you spin them as they get used up. That's very, very good mechanism there. And then the bureaucracy is a lot easier, but a lot of the aspects of Power Grid is there. So it does. I mean, if you take out the network building, the map, obviously, and all the math that goes along with that, you pretty much have this game. It does feel like that, just minused out. However, there are some differences there that I felt as well. Is that turn order, I think it feels equally as brutal to be first in turn order for the auctions because you really want those better things, and it's harder to get them as people are waiting for the better stuff to cream to rise to the top. But with the resources, I love the way it works. I think it's absolutely awesome. If you were to make a shorter, streamlined version of Power Grid, I couldn't have asked it to be any better. The one thing I did notice, I would say, is during the resource buying, if you're first in turn order, which means you're buying last, I guess in this case, it didn't feel quite as brutal as the Power Grid game does, because the Power Grid game has a very specific way of how much of each of the different resources is being restocked during the first, second, and third phase of that game. So, for example, coal gets very scarce towards the end of the game. There's less of it being put out, most of it's getting bought up, and so it's harder to get enough resources if people are buying them all up. Where here, it's not necessarily that. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily be that. It's not necessarily that way because of the random nature of the way that those cards come out. And they come out and they're very expensive if you really want them, but then they come down cheaper. And so it didn't feel as brutal. So I'd say if you were to take Power Grid, take a lot of the math out of it, of the network building, make it a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier to teach, a little bit less brutal on the resource buying of turn order. That's what you have here. You have a more approachable, quicker, easier, streamlined version of this excellent game, but it still keeps most of the meat. Since I feel like it was less mathy. Now, towards the end, you're going to be doing math and trying to make sure everything you're doing is right, but you don't have that additional step of all the math of, okay, I want to go here, I want to build here, I got to watch out for this, it costs this, but I still need this much money for resources. It takes a whole step of that out, so it does make it a lot easier. For those of you people that thought Power Grid was too mathy, this sort of solves a lot of that, but for the people that like the math, there's still enough there. So I think they did exactly what they should have done. I think it's an excellent, fantastic version of the game. 60 minutes says on the box. That is pretty accurate. in my experience, and so I love it. And so I am going to be keeping in my gaming library. So let's induct it properly with a saxophone serenade.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for backing me on Kickstarter and making this season become a reality. I'd like to especially thank those here that have backed me at the credit level. Now, these video reviews are also available by audio on our podcast. It's the intros and the final thoughts on GameBoyGeek.com. Click podcast.